Welcome to a very special edition of Grace Under Pressure. Today, we're going to be talking about my brand new book, Grace Under Pressure, Leading Through Change and Crisis. And in honor of that occasion, I have invited my good friend, Eddie Turner, to be the host for today. Eddie, take it away.
John, it is such an honor to be here with you and to be the guest host of your very popular show, Grace Under Pressure. I'm excited. As you mentioned, I'm Eddie Turner, and I am a principal consultant and executive coach at Linkage, a SHRM company, where I'm helping to change the face of leadership and create better places and a better world through the power of executive coaching, delivering leadership sessions and keynotes. And to be here with you today, John, is really an honor because you are a prolific author. And when I say prolific author, it's not just this new book that you've released, Grace Under Pressure. But I want to invite everybody who's tuning into this session to follow you on Amazon.com. This book is going to be released on April the 4th, 2023. And pretty impressive is the fact that it's being distributed by Simon & Schuster. This book has been endorsed by Marshall Goldsmith, the #1 leadership thinker and executive coach, Liz Weissman, a New York Times bestselling author, the author of the #1 coaching book in history, The Coaching Habit, Michael Bungay Stanger, Sally Hegelson, the premier authority on women's leadership, and the author of the recently released Rising Together. Also, the ICF CEO, the CEO of WD-40, Dory Clark, Martin Lindstrom, and many, many others have put their weight behind this book. So we want everybody to go ahead and go to Amazon.com, pre-order the book. It's available now, or you can wait and get it on April the 4th. But we say get it now. And while you're there, hit the follow button. Follow John Baldoni as an author, and you will get a chance to see all of his work on leadership, all the books that he has released. And I'm just scrolling through a few of them here. It takes up at least 4 rows here as I'm sliding through. And then to see them all, you have to launch a whole new page by hitting the See All button. So definitely, John Baldoni is a man who is the king of leadership. And that's just not me saying that. John is an internationally known keynote speaker and author of these 16 books that have been translated into 10 different languages. So truly being read all over the world. And John was named as the #1 thought leader by Thinkers 360. Number 10 on the thought leadership list in 2022. And then that Global Gurus ranked him as number 15 on their leadership list. In 2021, the International Federation of Learning and Development named John a world-class mentor and named him to its Hall of Fame. And John has been recognized by Inc. as being one of their top 50 leadership experts, and he's a part of the renowned Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches. So truly an honor to be here and being your guest host today, interviewing you, John Baldoni.
Well, Eddie, I don't think I've ever had such a glowing endorsement. I think you can keep on going. I really like it. But I don't think we would lose our audience. Thank you, my friend, and fellow member of 100 Coaches, too. So
truly an honor. Well, John, tell us about the motivation for writing this latest work, Grace Under Pressure, Leading Through Change and Crisis.
It's a good question. I've had the opportunity to write a number of books, as you know, Eddie, and thank you for sharing that with our audience. This is my 3rd book on the topic of grace. And I did one in 2019 and got a lot of good reviews called Grace, A Leader's Guide to a Better Us. Got great reviews, but a lot of people go, well, it's a nice topic, but do we really need it? Well, then we got hit with COVID. And so we all shrunk down and the idea of kindness and empathy and compassion rose to the fore. So I did a little book on reflections called Grace Notes, which you have spoken about before. And that's more a poetry and reflections on what leaders need to do in times of crisis. But I was thinking, how do I give grace the topic a little more muscle. And our good friend, C.B. Bowman gave me a title. She goes, Grace Under Pressure. And our other good friend, Chester Elton, said, Leading Through Change and Crisis. So CB and Chester gave me the ideas for framing the book. So what the book is about is how we deal with times of change and crisis, which is basically continual. And here's the thing. It's three things. First, you take care of your people, take care of yourself, and you prepare for the future. That's not rocket science. Every business school in the country teaches that kind of stuff, not just the country, the world. What I tried to do, differentiate, Eddie, is inject the concept of grace. So what is grace? Grace is the catalyst for the greater good. Grace is that facilitates what? Connection. And from connection, we have community. And how do we live community? Well, we pull people together for common cause, but we exert something more. Kindness, compassion, courage as a means of saying we're in this together. And leaders step to the fore and they lead through these times of change and crisis.
Kindness, compassion, leading through change and crisis. What a beautiful way of explaining it. And I appreciate you defining grace, because when people hear that, they have different thoughts that come to their mind. And so for someone who's just discovering your work, what a wonderful way for them to discover your work and understand that definition that you mean when you say grace. And the motivation and the title, you explain that as well. Simply fabulous. And I think that it not only is a good title that's easy to remember, but it really helps people understand the purpose and what you mean behind it.
Right, and grace is the gift that is given to us with no strings attached. It's what we do with it that makes it. So when we think about tough times we're going through, crises, or even change, which is unsettling, how about we do it with an eye toward others? And, leaders, you know this well from your great coaching and all the things you have written, Eddie, and few leaders, if any, really achieve anything by themselves. No, they have to create followership. People want to believe. And I had this thing about, I've written about the topic of purpose, and purpose is our why. And many people have said that, but purpose is sparks our vision, our sense of becoming. It sparks our mission, which is our doing. But it also, and it's rooted, if it's going to work, in our sense of values. And that's where grace comes in. So, we all know organizations that are visionary and have strong mission, but are they places that people really want to belong to? And that's where grace comes in. So,
thank you. So if I want to bring grace in, as you're describing, the big question becomes, how?
Well, that's the $64,000 question. It comes down to self. It comes down to making a personal choice, to choosing to make, as our good friend Marshall Goldsmith teaches us, to live with a spirit of generosity, to live with a spirit of abundance, to say, we can share with others what we have. And that brings people towards you. So it first begins with this personal act of, I can share, I can do this. And then ideally people will come to you. Now, grace isn't this, soft, amorphous thing. We can think of it that way, but there's a spine to it. And what I like to think of it as, it's our backbone. It gives us the strength for our backbone. It gives us this sense that we can accomplish things. But here's the thing: grace, the very topic of grace under pressure, was used by John Kennedy, who knew all about personal courage. And so it's that courage to stand up, to make a difference, to stand up for your people, stand up for your values, stand up for what you believe in. Grace facilitates that.
Wonderful. And you mentioned John Kennedy. Are there other examples of leaders that are doing this well?
Well, yeah. And I think all you have to do is look in your community. And we see examples of grace everywhere. Eddie, you know this. I have the opportunity, the privilege really, of speaking or of playing piano at a hospital. I'm in the lobby, and I call myself a headliner because I'm the only one there. I can call myself what I want. But I've been playing in hospitals for a long time now. And the folks that I see there, I see daily acts of grace. I see the way staff treat patients. I see the way they treat the family members. That's an action of grace. Nursing care, that's all grace. So we see it in our communities. We see it certainly with pastors and things like that. We see it with youth sports coaches. We see it with first responders. It's that simple act of kindness. You know, I do a show, you've been a guest a couple of times, called Grace Under Pressure. And I've asked every guest to tell me a story about grace in their own life. And some of the stories have been transactional. Like, I remember a time I was having a tough day. It was raining. Someone gave me an umbrella. Simple. And then people have told me stories that have been life-changing, saved their life, changed the direction of their life. That was grace. And, you know, it's also in a workplace. A couple of folks have told me that when they've had a personal crisis, and their boss said, Eddie, I want you to, so for example, a parent was ill. Eddie, go to your mother, spend time with her. And you know what? I don't want you to be thinking about work. I want you to focus on your family. That is an act of grace. And it takes that burden off the individual. And these are high achieving people who are making a positive difference and feel responsible for others. But in that moment of grace, their colleague, their boss says, Eddie, your family needs you. Take time. Do it now. That's grace.
So grace is an actionable behavior we can see. And when I hear that, it sounds like it's analogous to humility. Is there a role for humility in this concept?
Without question. And, you know, grace, it facilitates behavior change or a positive behavior. I'm glad you talked about humility, because I think what COVID taught leaders was it's okay to be humble. And Julia Burstein did a wonderful book called When Women Lead. And I interviewed her on my show, and she said that some of the most effective leaders, at least during the time of the lockdown, were women leaders. Why? Because they weren't afraid to raise their hand and said, I need help. And, you know, Eddie, we as men, we like to exert ourselves. I'm tough. I'll gut it out. Well, you know, yeah, we all need help. And so that's an act of humility. It's showing vulnerability. And I think a lot of us, men particularly, are afraid to show a vulnerable side because they'll think, oh, well, they're going to think I'm weak. And so, well, just the opposite. You know, it's a sign, in my opinion, it's a sign of strength to raise your hand and say, I need help. And then what you do is you give that in return. And from the leaders, it's all of us pushing together. And this humility leads to something also, which is inherent in the book. And it's the spirit of community. Call it psychological safety. We feel we belong and we can contribute and we feel safe. That doesn't mean we all think nor act alike, and goodness knows that's not a positive thing, but we share our values. We believe in one another. You and I have the benefit of belonging to a wonderful organization, 100 Coaches, which is the sharing community, and it's enriched my life. It's enriched yours. I know. And that's an example of it. Now, that's a professional organization, if you will, sort of, but the same thing can happen at work. And I think people are looking for that. We're looking for meaning in life. And you and I have had these conversations that the concept of loneliness is not the concept, the actual feeling of it is on the rise. People are feeling lonely. Grace is a means of reaching out and connecting. And grace says, you know, I haven't talked to Eddie for a while. I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to text him. How you doing? Let's have a conversation. I'm there. It's not a big deal. That's a small act of grace. Other times it can be, hey, can you help me with this or that, whatever. It's how I can be more of service to others. And in return, we help one another.
Well, John, if I'm going to be a leader who leads with grace in a time of crisis and in a time of change, I need to be a little bit more than just humble. In your book, you talk about the need for me to be resilient.
Resilience is so important. And on the show, I've had a few guests who have been special forces individuals, and they train for high stress situations so that when they get in, perhaps it's combat or another stress situation, they still feel the fear, but they know how to deal with it. The same thing with us. I've learned a lot about resilience from a couple of people, one of whom is our colleague, Sharon Melnick, and I quote her extensively throughout the book. And it comes down to self-care, learn to shut down when you need to. But also there's another thought that Eileen McDarg has taught me about getting knocked down and bouncing back. Yes, but you come back to a new reality. And that's what we've all experienced through COVID, is that the world of 2020 is long gone and is well in the rearview mirror. The world we're living through now has been changed, and so have we. And Eddie, we're tougher, more resilient. And I think leaders need to teach resilience. And I think we've got this great example because we're all here. Our businesses have succeeded. We've succeeded. We're still cooking, and maybe it's on not the same job we had 3 years ago, but we're still moving forward. That's a form of resilience, and we all need to be resilient. And that's rooted in that. I think grace facilitates it. So,
indeed. In fact, you quoted Sharon Melnick, who's one of our members. Another one of our members in the 100 Coaches organization is Dr. Edie Greenblatt, and perhaps one of the forerunners in this work around resilience in her work there at Harvard. And one of the points that she'd say is, hey, not only do you bounce back to a new reality, as you mentioned, but you bounce back harder, you bounce back stronger. So just a really nice way of looking at that. Well, the other component that is important through all this is you talk about the need to remain calm in the time of crisis. How do I do that?
Well, I'm going to go back to Sharon Melnick, because it comes back to learning to turn off. Because if you're always on, you get the act of diminishing returns. It's going to recover. You'll suffer burnout, and burnout is epidemic right now. So how do you learn to shut down? There's all kinds of ways. It's a discipline. You can do it as simply as little moments. Of a good friend of mine, Donald Altman, who's a therapist and author, talks about the pause, stepping away from the desk for a few minutes, looking out the window, going for a walk, deep breathing. I don't practice yoga. My wife does, but I've learned a few breathing techniques, and breathing from the diaphragm a few times. That gets oxygen into your lungs. And to me, whenever I breathe deeply from my diaphragm, I feel kind of invigorated, but I also feel centered. That's a small thing. Meditation is another form. And that's a discipline of setting aside time to think of just stepping back. Then there's also the sense of mindfulness. And I think this is important for leaders, because mindfulness is being in the moment and being active and noticing things around you. So you can say it as a cliche, taking time to smell the roses. Yes, look at all of that. But for a leader, it's taking perspective. And there's a little 3-question mantra. I learned this a long time ago. It's a military example. It's what's happening, what is not happening, and what do I do to influence the outcome? And that's a way of taking perspective. So it's a way of just distancing from the here and now. It takes effort, Eddie. It takes patience. And you're speaking to someone for whom I revere patience. Patience is not a gift that I possess. I'm working on it. So,
well, you must be very patient, because you've patiently written 16 different books, and that's not something that happens through expediency. So kudos to you on that, John. What else should readers know when they pick up this fantastic new release that you have coming out in a couple of weeks?
Well, I think it's this sense that we're all in this together. Okay. So, how much better is it if we demonstrate a little bit of kindness toward each other? I have a little saying, and it's called focus on better. And so, what do I mean by that? It means focus on, you determine what better means, define it for yourself, what it means to be a better friend, a better colleague, a better spouse, a better citizen, and then act on it. And with the sense of better, it's what can I do to make the world around me that much better?
Fantastic, John. Well, we just want to remind people that they can get their copy, their hard copy, like I have here. I got an advanced copy, obviously, or they can get their copy on Kindle from Amazon.com. What else do we need to let people know as we wrap up here in our closing?
Well, if folks want more information about me, it's my website, which is in the notes, johnbaldoni.com. I also write regularly for Forbes.com as well as for Smart Brief. And as you know, Eddie, I do a LinkedIn Live show pretty much on a weekly basis when I can. And it's called Grace Under Pressure. And I interview thought leaders and doers, people who are making the world a better place. And just for kicks, I told you I play piano, and on every Monday, I post a little piece of music with me playing the piano. Not always very well, but it's 1 or 2 minutes of which I hope is good cheer that kicks off your week. I call it Motivation Monday, and you can find it on LinkedIn.
Motivation Mondays on LinkedIn, Grace Under Pressure on LinkedIn. John's writings are available on Forbes, Harvard Business Review, and Smart Brief. Definitely tune in, because not only does he do the LinkedIn Live on LinkedIn, obviously, but also they're available as podcasts later on. So if you missed an episode, tune in wherever you download podcasts. You can get John has interviewed some of the top thought leaders in leadership and business in the world, literally. So if you've missed an episode, I encourage you, check it out, download the podcast, subscribe to John's newsletter, and follow him on social media and Amazon. And it has been my great pleasure to be your co-host today, John Baldoni. Thank you for having me, Eddie Turner, with you. And it was a reminder to all leaders, remember, it's always important in leadership to show grace under pressure.
Thank you, my friend. I couldn't ask for a better host. Thank you.